welcome to tonight's sleep story. Let's drift into a soothing story together as you begin your journey into a restful and rejuvenating sleep. The early morning light filtered softly through the window, gently caressing the wooden floor. Elara woke slowly, her eyes blinking into the half-light of dawn. The room was still and quiet, save for the soft rustling of the trees outside, where the wind whispered through the leaves. The scent of fresh earth lingered in the air, mixing with the faint, comforting smell of bread, baking from the nearby kitchen. But, despite the peacefulness of the moment, Elara felt an unfamiliar heaviness settle in her chest. Her fingers brushed the soft blanket, the fabric cool against her skin, but it offered no comfort today. Another day like the one before. The thought felt almost like a weight she had been carrying for so long that she had stopped noticing it. Yet, in this quiet room, with the day just beginning, Elara couldn't ignore it anymore. She sat up, her feet touching the cold floor, and wrapped her arms around her knees. The familiar world around her, the small cottage, the simple furniture, the quiet routine of life, suddenly felt like a cage. The air, so fresh and clean, seemed to close in on her. She had spent so many years here, content in the simple rhythms of daily life, but today, everything felt different. The walls of the cottage seemed to close in, the ceiling pressing lower, the earth beneath her feet sinking deeper. It wasn't that she hated the life she had built. She had always been grateful for the shelter, the warm meals, the sense of belonging. Her family was kind and the villagers were friendly, but there was something else. A longing that had been growing quietly within her, almost unnoticed. She longed for more than this. She longed for the freedom she had only ever heard about in stories. Freedom to choose, to explore, to live without the constraints of tradition or routine. She stood and walked to the window, staring out at the vast expanse of rolling hills and endless sky. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the landscape in soft shades of pink and gold. It was beautiful, but it was also a reminder of how small she felt. The world outside felt so open, so full of possibilities. She could hear the birds waking up, their songs mingling with the soft rustling of the wind in the trees. The sight of the hills, the promise of adventure, filled her with a strange mix of excitement and fear. How many times had she looked out at this same view and felt the pull of something more? How many times had she dreamed of stepping into that world, leaving behind the safety of her familiar life? Elara turned away from the window, her heart beating faster. She had always believed that she was meant for something different, something beyond the quiet routine of her days. The thought of adventure stirred something deep within her. She could hear her own voice, soft yet firm, as if coming from somewhere deep inside her. What if there is more out there for me? She had never dared to say it aloud, even to herself, until now. The thought seemed daring, reckless even, but it felt like the truth. Her heart had been quietly yearning for freedom. Freedom to be more than just the girl who swept the floors and prepared meals. To be someone who could choose her own path, to live in a way that was entirely hers. But there was also the fear of leaving behind everything she knew, the comfort of the familiar. What if she made a mistake? What if the world was more terrifying than she imagined? She had heard the stories, of course, stories of wanderers, of adventurers who had found their way into unknown lands, some returning with riches, others never to be seen again. She had wondered more than once what it would feel like to be one of those people, to venture into the unknown. But would she be brave enough? Could she really step away from the life she had, the life that provided her with comfort and security? The stillness in the room pressed on her, but she didn't feel trapped by it, not anymore. She felt it instead as an invitation, a call to break free. Elara's gaze drifted back to the window, her mind racing with possibilities. She imagined herself walking away from the house, down the narrow path leading to the open fields, her feet light as she stepped into a new world, one full of uncertainty, but also full of hope. The sun, now fully rising, cast a golden light over the hills, and Elara felt as though she too was rising with it. Today could be the day, she whispered to herself, the words feeling both fragile and powerful. It was the first time she had truly allowed herself to say it, to believe it. Today could be the beginning of something entirely new. Elara couldn't shake the feeling that something was stirring deep inside her, a restlessness that had never been there before. She spent the next few days in a haze, moving through her routine with mechanical precision, but her mind kept returning to the same thought. What if I left? What if she left behind everything that was familiar? Her family, the small village, the quiet rhythm of everyday life, and ventured into the world beyond. But the uncertainty was overwhelming. What would she do? Where would she go? Her thoughts swirled in circles, each answer leading to more questions, and yet the pull of the unknown felt stronger with each passing day. On the third day after her moment of reflection, as Elara walked towards the market square, she saw a stranger standing at the corner of the cobbled streets. His appearance was striking, tall with a rough traveller's cloak and dark eyes that seemed to glimmer with an enigmatic spark. He was speaking with the local blacksmith, but as Elara passed by, his gaze caught hers, and for a brief moment, everything around her seemed to fade. There was a quiet curiosity in his eyes, a knowing look that made Elara's heart race. She quickly looked away, feeling a sudden flush of warmth in her cheeks, but as she continued walking, she couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened. It wasn't just the stranger's gaze, it was the sense that he might be someone who had crossed paths with people like her before, people who wanted more than the life they had been given. Her thoughts churned as she completed her errands, but the encounter stuck with her. Who was he? And more importantly, why did it feel like he was the answer to something she hadn't even fully realized she was looking for? That evening, after a long day of work, Elara sat by the fire, her mind restless. She tried to distract herself with the mundane tasks at hand, sewing the hem of her dress, mending a tear in the fabric, but it was no use. The stranger's eyes kept flashing in her mind, and along with them, the growing, gnawing desire to break free from the life she knew. Just as she was about to give in to her thoughts, there was a knock on the door. Startled, Elara rose from her chair and opened it to find the stranger standing in front of her. "Good evening," he greeted her with a warm yet mysterious smile. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I saw you earlier today, and I felt as though I needed to speak with you." Elara's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to see him again, let alone have him come to her door. What could he want? 1,000 questions rushed through her mind, but she managed to keep her voice steady. I'm not sure what you mean. I was just walking to the market," she replied, trying to hide the surprise in her voice. "I know," the stranger said, his eyes twinkling with a knowing light. "But sometimes it's not just the places we go that lead us to where we need to be. It's the people we meet along the way. I believe we were meant to cross paths." Elara felt a strange pull to his words. It wasn't just his gaze. There was something in his voice that made her feel as though he understood exactly what was going on inside her. A longing, a desire to step into something bigger, something more than what she had known. "Come, walk with me," the stranger said, extending a hand, his tone gentle but firm. "There is something I wish to show you, something beyond these walls." Elara hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. The safety of her home, the familiarity of her quiet life, was suddenly at odds with the call of the unknown. She could feel the pull to step outside, to follow him, to take that first step into a world she had always dreamed of. But her mind screamed in protest. What if you regret it? What if it's a mistake? However, the stranger's presence felt like a lifeline to something more. With a deep breath, Elara made her decision. She stepped outside, feeling the cool night air on her skin as she followed him down the path. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety. "To where your heart longs to be," the stranger replied. "But first you must learn to listen to it. The world beyond these walls is vast, and only by taking that first step will you begin to understand the kind of life you are meant to live." The cool night air brushed Elara's face as she stepped outside, her heart racing with anticipation. The stranger walked ahead, his long cloak flowing behind him, and Elara followed, drawn by an invisible thread. The quiet of the village enveloped them, and the usual sounds, the creaking of doors, the distant chatter of neighbors, seemed muffled by the weight of the moment. For the first time in her life, Elara felt as if she were truly awake, her senses heightened, every detail of the night unfolding with clarity. The path they walked on was familiar to her, one she had taken many times on her way to the market or to the fields, but tonight it felt different. The trees that lined the way, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, seemed to stretch out toward her, as if welcoming her into the unknown. The faint rustling of leaves beneath her feet, the soft chirping of crickets, the scent of damp earth, all of it felt like a whisper, urging her forward, encouraging her to leave the comfort of the familiar behind. The stranger did not speak as they walked, but his presence beside her was enough to fill the silence with a sense of possibility. Elara was not sure what to expect, but there was a confidence in him that made her feel safe, as if he knew exactly where they were headed, even if she did not. As they reached the edge of the village, the moonlight bathed the landscape in a silvery glow, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly into the night. "This is the boundary," the stranger finally spoke, his voice soft but firm. "Beyond this, everything changes." Elara stopped, her feet rooted to the ground as she looked ahead, her pulse quickening. She had walked this path 1,000 times before, but now it seemed to stretch out infinitely, like an uncharted world waiting to be discovered. The familiar homes of the village were now a distant silhouette behind her, and ahead there was nothing but the open road. It was as if the very earth beneath her feet had shifted, as though the land itself was waiting to reveal something new. "What happens beyond this point?" Elara asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as though speaking louder might break the fragile moment. The stranger turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "What happens is up to you," he said. "This is where you choose, Elara. This is where you begin your journey. Not to find something, but to create it." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. To create it. It was not just about seeking something out there in the world. It was about shaping her own path. The world beyond the village was not a place to escape to, but a place to build. A space where she could become who she was meant to be, free from the expectations of those around her. For the first time, Elara understood. She had always been waiting for life to happen to her, for something or someone to come and change her fate. But now, standing at the edge of the village, looking out at the vast open world, she realized that the change had always been in her own hands. She had the power to shape her destiny, to create a life that was hers, and hers alone. The stranger smiled as if he knew exactly what she was thinking, and then turned, continuing down the path. Elara hesitated for only a moment before following. The road ahead was still unclear, but for the first time in her life, it was hers to walk. As she walked beside him, the village growing smaller in the distance, Elara felt a sense of liberation she had never known. The weight of her old life, the expectations, the routines, the limitations, began to feel lighter, as if they had been left behind with every step she took. The freedom she had longed for was not something she would find outside of herself, but something that existed within her. Something that had always been there, waiting to be discovered. They walked in silence, the path winding through the trees, and Elara felt a deep sense of peace. The world around her was vast, and yet she no longer felt small or insignificant. She was part of it, and in that moment she realized that everything was possible. After a while, the stranger stopped, and Elara did too. They had come to a clearing where the moonlight shone down in a silvery pool, casting everything in soft, ethereal light. Elara took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill her lungs, and then she looked at the stranger. "How will I know where to go?" she asked, the question lingering in the air. The stranger smiled, his eyes soft with understanding. "You'll know. The path will reveal itself to you, just as you will reveal yourself to the path." Elara's heart beat faster at his words. For the first time, she felt like she was standing on the threshold of something incredible, something that would change her forever. She was no longer waiting for life to happen. She was creating it. She wasn't just going to follow the road. She was going to forge it with her own hands. The stranger turned and began walking again, this time with more purpose. Elara followed, and as she did, she felt a sense of clarity growing within her. She wasn't lost anymore. She was finding herself. The deeper Elara walked into the forest, the more alive the world around her felt. The trees, tall and ancient, stretched upward as if to reach the stars, their branches swaying gently in the cool night breeze. The moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting soft, dappled shadows on the ground. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to take the next step. Elara's heart still beat with the excitement of her decision, but now there was a quiet stillness inside her too, an acceptance of what lay ahead. She had left everything behind, the village, the familiar faces, the life that once felt both secure and suffocating, were now a distant memory. She was no longer who she had been. She was someone new, someone who was not bound by the expectations of others. The road ahead seemed endless, but rather than feeling lost, Elara felt a sense of purpose. Each step felt like a deliberate movement towards something important. She was walking toward freedom, yes, but not in the way she had imagined. It wasn't about escaping from something. It was about creating something new from the raw, untapped potential within herself. The stranger walked beside her in silence, as though he was waiting for her to come to her own understanding. Elara didn't mind the silence. It was comforting, not oppressive. She could hear the soft crunch of the earth beneath their feet, the distant call of an owl in the trees, and the occasional rustling of a creature moving through the underbrush. It was the kind of silence that made her feel connected to the world around her. She could sense the energy in the air, the life in the forest, and she began to realize something profound. This was where she was meant to be, but still doubts lingered. What if she wasn't strong enough for this journey? What if she faltered? What if the freedom she sought was just a mirage, something that would only bring her more emptiness? She wanted to be brave. She wanted to walk forward with her head held high, but there was a part of her that couldn't help but fear the unknown. The stranger seemed to sense her hesitation, though he never asked directly. Instead, he led her to a small clearing, bathed in soft moonlight. The air here was cooler, the shadows deeper, but there was a calmness to it, like a moment of peace before something important was about to unfold. The stranger turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the gentle light. "This is where you begin to understand," he said quietly, as if the forest itself had urged him to speak. "This is where you choose who you are and who you will become." Elara stood still, her breath catching in her chest. "How do I know what to choose?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a question that had been lingering at the edge of her thoughts since they left the village. How could she possibly know what was right for her when the road was still so unclear, so undefined? The stranger smiled, his expression softening. "You don't have to know everything all at once," he said gently. "The journey doesn't come with a map, Elara. It's not about having all the answers. It's about trusting yourself, trusting that each step, each choice, will lead you where you need to go." Her heart fluttered, a wave of something between hope and fear rising in her chest. Trust. It felt like such a simple word, yet it carried so much weight. To trust was to let go, to surrender to the unknown, to accept that she couldn't control every detail of the future. "Trust," Elara whispered to herself, letting the words settle into her heart. She had always thought that control was the key to happiness, but now she wondered if it was trust that would open the door to her true freedom. The stranger's words resonated in her soul as the moon rose higher in the sky, its silver light growing stronger. The path will reveal itself, just as you will reveal yourself to the path. There is no need to rush. Let the journey unfold in its own time. Elara nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon where the forest seemed to stretch into eternity. The uncertainty no longer felt like something to be feared. Instead, it felt like something to be embraced. The future was a vast, unknown landscape, but she was no longer afraid of it. She was ready to step into it with open arms, ready to shape her destiny with each choice, each step, each breath. With a newfound sense of calm, Elara continued on her journey, no longer questioning every path she came upon. Instead, she walked with purpose, embracing the fluidity of the moment, trusting that as long as she stayed true to herself, she would find the way, just as the path would find her. The stranger walked beside her, silently guiding her forward. The night wrapped around them like a blanket, the world feeling both vast and intimate at once. They moved through the forest together, as if the forest itself was a living being, accompanying them on this shared journey. The air was cool, and the sounds of the night seemed to slow, softening the world around them. It was the perfect stillness, one that invited reflection and growth. Each step Elara took was more confident than the last. She felt grounded, connected to something larger than herself. The path ahead was still unknown, but it no longer mattered. She was ready to face it. Elara's journey had only just begun, but already she could feel the world shifting around her. The path through the forest stretched out in front of her, winding through the dense trees like a living entity, alive with possibility. Every step she took felt like a step deeper into herself, each movement shedding the weight of her past. It was as if the forest, the night, and the soft rustling of the leaves were all part of a larger symphony, guiding her forward. The silence around them, punctuated only by the occasional chirp of a distant bird or the crunch of leaves underfoot, felt like a moment suspended in time. She had walked for hours, and though her feet were beginning to ache, she felt no desire to stop. The feeling of freedom, of walking without the constraints of the life she had left behind, was intoxicating. She had never imagined it could feel this way. With every mile she put between herself and the village, the more her mind seemed to clear, the more her heart seemed to open. But still, the echoes of her past clung to her, like shadows in the corners of her mind. The life she had known, the people she had left behind, and the small familiar world she had once inhabited were all distant memories. As much as she longed for the freedom she was now tasting, part of her still feared the unknown. What if the world outside was not as welcoming as it seemed? What if she couldn't handle the challenges ahead? The stranger who had walked beside her in silence for hours finally broke the stillness, his voice calm and steady. "It's natural to feel uncertain," he said, glancing at her with understanding. "Leaving behind the familiar can be the hardest part of the journey. But remember, the past only has power over you if you let it. It's behind you for a reason." Elara looked up at him, surprised by his words. She hadn't realized she had been lost in thought, wrestling with the feelings of doubt and fear that had begun to creep into her heart. "I know," she said softly, "but it's hard not to feel tied to it. The village, my family, everything I've ever known is so far behind me. How do I let go of all of that?" The stranger's smile was small but reassuring. "By walking forward," he replied, "by not allowing the past to define who you are today. The road behind you may be where you came from, but the road ahead is where you're going. You're no longer the person you were when you left. You are becoming someone new with every step you take." Elara felt a quiet shift within herself. It wasn't just his words, but the way he said them, the certainty and calmness in his voice that made her feel as though it was true. She was changing. The path ahead seemed to stretch out endlessly before her, but this time it no longer felt overwhelming. There was something liberating about the thought of letting go of the past. She had spent so many years seeking approval, following expectations, and worrying about what others thought of her. But here, in the stillness of the night, she realized she didn't need anyone's approval anymore. She didn't need to be anyone else but herself. And that was enough. As they continued to walk, Elara became aware of the landscape around her in a way she hadn't before. The trees, their trunks thick with age, seemed to stand as silent sentinels to her journey. The air, fresh and cool, filled her lungs with every breath. The sky above them was clear, the stars twinkling with a quiet brilliance. It was a night filled with possibilities. "Where are we going?" Elara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't out of fear, but curiosity. She had no idea what lay ahead, but the uncertainty now felt like an invitation, not a threat. The stranger glanced over at her, a glint of understanding in his eyes. "Wherever you choose," he said. "That's the beauty of this journey. It's not a path someone else has laid out for you. It's your own." Elara smiled softly, her heart swelling with a sense of liberation. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly free. Not because she was away from the village, not because of the stranger's presence, but because she had taken control of her own life. The path was hers to decide, and that knowledge filled her with strength. There were no more restrictions, no more expectations. She could go anywhere, be anything, create her own destiny. The forest around her no longer felt like an obstacle. It felt like a beginning. She was no longer walking toward a destination defined by someone else's vision. She was walking toward a future she could shape for herself. As they continued deeper into the forest, the trees growing thicker around them, Elara felt a sense of peace settle into her chest. She wasn't afraid anymore. The world, with all its vastness and unknowns, no longer felt threatening. It felt full of promise. Each step she took, each choice she made, was hers alone to define. And with that realization came a sense of freedom. Freedom from the constraints of the past. Freedom to become the person she was always meant to be. Elara continued to walk, the forest now stretching out in a peaceful expanse around her. The night was deepening, and the gentle sounds of nature filled the air. The rustle of the leaves, the soft hum of distant creatures, and the steady rhythm of her footsteps on the dirt path. The world around her felt alive, breathing in time with her own movements. She had thought that leaving the village would be the hardest part, but now, with every step she took, the weight that had pressed on her heart seemed to ease. She no longer felt burdened by the idea of freedom. What once felt like an overwhelming abyss now seemed like an open door, leading her toward the life she had always imagined. And yet, despite the quiet peace that surrounded her, she could still hear the echoes of doubt deep within her. Whispers that reminded her of the life she had left behind. The memories of the village, her family, the comforting rhythm of daily life tugged at her heart. She had loved her family. She had found comfort in their expectations, and part of her feared what the future might hold. What if this journey, this quest for freedom, led her nowhere? What if it was all just a dream, something she would regret when the novelty wore off and the truth set in? But as the thoughts began to creep in, Elara did something she hadn't allowed herself to do in years. She paused. She stood still in the middle of the forest, listening to the quiet hum of life around her. The night was not dark and suffocating, but calm and full of gentle light. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, feeling the air rush into her lungs. She realized in that moment that her thoughts did not need to control her. She could choose which path to follow. Her thoughts were just thoughts, and they did not define who she was or where she was headed. With a slow breath, Elara allowed herself to feel the connection to the world around her. The trees, the earth beneath her feet, the crisp night air. These things were not here to make her feel small. They were here to remind her of how alive she was, how connected to everything she had ever known and everything she was yet to discover. The wind stirred in the trees, and Elara's eyes fluttered open. A familiar feeling, one she had never really recognized before, washed over her. A sense of belonging. Not to the village, not to the life she had left behind, but to this moment, to this journey that was unfolding with each step she took. The stranger had stopped ahead of her, turning to wait. There was a small knowing smile on his lips, as if he understood exactly what was happening within her. "Are you ready to keep going?" he asked, his voice gentle, but carrying a weight of encouragement. Elara met his gaze, feeling her heart settle, her inner turmoil slowly fading. "Yes," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "I am." With that simple declaration, she took another step forward. It wasn't a grand gesture. There were no dramatic turns or revelations, no moments of absolute clarity. It was a simple choice to keep moving, to embrace the journey, and to trust in what was ahead. The road still stretched on, the path winding and unknown, but Elara no longer felt burdened by its uncertainty. She was choosing it, choosing herself, and that was enough. The journey ahead wasn't one of escape, it was one of discovery, of finding herself and walking toward her own light. As they walked deeper into the night, Elara began to realize that her journey wasn't just about leaving what she had known. It was about moving toward what she could become, and that sense of possibility, that open road, stretched out before her like a canvas waiting to be painted. Elara walked steadily, her feet light on the earth, but her mind still carrying the weight of everything she had left behind. The forest was growing denser now, the trees towering above her like silent witnesses to her journey. As she moved deeper into the woods, she found herself becoming more attuned to the subtle signs of nature around her. The rustle of leaves, the way the breeze danced through the branches and the distant hum of a flowing river. The path seemed to narrow, guiding her toward the source of the sound, and without a word she followed the stranger, knowing he had something to show her. As they reached a clearing, the trees opened up to reveal a river, its waters shimmering in the soft moonlight. The river stretched far into the distance, a winding force of nature that seemed to carry with it both peace and power. Elara stood at the edge of the water, gazing out over its rippling surface. There was something about the river that felt familiar, almost like a reflection of her own journey, a flowing current, constantly moving, never stagnant. "This is the river of reflection," the stranger said, his voice calm and steady. "It carries with it the memories of all who have crossed it, the thoughts, the emotions, the choices that have shaped them. It flows just like life, always changing, always moving." Elara stepped closer to the water, her eyes scanning its surface. She could see the reflection of the trees above, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. But as she looked deeper, she saw something more. Her own reflection. It wasn't just her physical appearance, but something deeper, something that resonated within her soul. She saw the girl who had once felt trapped, the one who had clung to familiar paths, too afraid to venture beyond. But she also saw the woman standing here now, the one who had chosen this path, who had chosen to walk away from the life she knew. The river wasn't just a body of water, it was a metaphor for her own journey, for the way her life had been shaped by both choice and circumstance. The water was ever-changing, just as she was, and it flowed forward, never looking back. She wondered, could she do the same? "What if I can't move forward?" Elara asked, her voice quiet as she turned to face the stranger. There was a deep ache in her chest, the remnants of the fear she had felt before, and for a moment it all rushed back to her. The uncertainty, the loneliness, the feeling of being unworthy. The stranger looked at her with understanding in his eyes, and he nodded slowly. "The river doesn't look back," he said, his voice gentle yet filled with wisdom. "It moves forward because it trusts the journey. It knows that where it's going is just as important as where it's been. You are the same. The past is a part of you, but it does not define you. Your path is in front of you, and the choices you make now will shape your future, just as the river shapes the land around it." Elara's gaze returned to the water, her reflection still rippling gently in its surface. She realized then that her fear, her hesitation, had been rooted in the belief that she couldn't change, that the past was too heavy to let go of, too ingrained in her being. But the stranger was right. The river moved forward, and so could she. It was not the past that defined her, but the choices she made in each present moment. Taking a deep breath, Elara stepped closer to the water. She knelt down, letting her fingers graze the surface, feeling the coolness of the river against her skin. As she touched the water, a sense of clarity washed over her. She didn't need to have all the answers. She didn't need to control the flow of her life. All she needed to do was trust the journey, to keep moving forward, even when the path seemed uncertain. She stood slowly looking at the stranger, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled. It wasn't a smile of perfection or certainty, but one of acceptance, acceptance of the unknown and of herself. "I'm ready," she said softly, the words feeling like a release, a letting go of all the weight she had been carrying. The river was moving forward, and so was she. The stranger nodded, a proud smile curving his lips. "You're ready, and as long as you trust the flow, you will always find your way." As they continued along the river's edge, the path beginning to widen before them, Elara felt a sense of peace settle within her. The world no longer felt so vast and intimidating. The journey, with all its uncertainties and twists, was now something she was ready to embrace. She didn't need to control it. She only needed to trust it. The river flowed beside them, a quiet companion in her journey. And, as the night deepened, Elara's heart felt lighter than it had in years. She was no longer afraid. The road ahead was still unclear, but she was no longer bound by the past or by fear. She had found her strength, and with each step she was discovering more of the person she was always meant to be. The path they walked grew quieter as the night deepened, the moon now fully risen, casting a silvery glow that softened the sharp edges of the world around them. The river beside them had become a gentle murmur in the background, the steady flow of water a constant companion to their journey. The air was cool, but Elara no longer felt the bite of the cold. The longer she walked, the lighter she felt. It was as though the weight she had been carrying had begun to dissipate, piece by piece, with each step forward. As they walked, the forest around them seemed to grow denser, the trees taller, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that shut out much of the sky. But the stars, like 1,000 tiny sparks of light, still peeked through the gaps in the leaves above, lighting their way. Elara took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp night air. It smelled of fresh pine and earth, of the quiet promise that each day held, waiting to unfold. There was a quiet harmony to the world around her, one that Elara had never fully appreciated until now. The soft rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant calls of nocturnal creatures, the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. Everything seemed to fit together, as if the universe itself was breathing in time with her. For the first time in a long time, she felt connected, not just to the earth beneath her feet, but to something far larger than herself. It was as though the forest had become a part of her, and she a part of it. She glanced at the stranger who walked a few paces ahead of her. His steady, calm presence was both a guide and a comfort. He had not spoken much since their encounter at the river, but his quiet companionship spoke volumes. Elara had come to realize that he wasn't just leading her on a physical journey, but a spiritual one as well. Every word he spoke, every action he took seemed designed to guide her not just on the path through the forest, but also toward an understanding of herself that she had been avoiding. As they walked in silence, Elara found herself thinking more and more about the decision she had made to leave her village, to step into the unknown. The initial fear she had felt had gradually faded, replaced by a quiet confidence. She had always wondered if she was capable of more than the life she had known, but now she was beginning to see the truth. She was not just capable, she was ready. Ready to face the unknown, to build a future without the crutches of security or the comfort of expectation. Her mind drifted back to the village, to the faces of her family and friends, and to the life she had left behind. There had been love there, but it was a love tangled in expectations. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how much she had felt like a small part of a much bigger picture, never fully able to express herself, to be herself without fear of disappointing someone or living up to some ideal of what she should be. She had always felt like there was something more inside her, something unspoken that was never given the chance to flourish. Now, she was beginning to find that voice, and it felt freeing. "You seem quieter tonight," the stranger said, breaking the silence in a voice that was soft but knowing. He glanced over his shoulder at her, his eyes glinting in the dim light. Elara smiled, though there was a sense of bittersweetness in her heart. "I think I'm just absorbing it all," she replied. "Everything is different now. I've never felt so..." She paused, searching for the right word. "Alive, I guess, like I'm waking up." The stranger nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's the first step," he said, his voice gentle. "We often have to leave everything behind in order to discover who we truly are. The old ways, the familiar paths, are comforting, yes, but they often keep us from seeing the full picture." One evening, after a long day of walking, the stranger led her to a hilltop. From this vantage point, Elara could see the world stretching out before her, the horizon wide and open, an endless expanse of land, sky, and possibility. The light of the setting sun bathed the scene in a warm, rich glow, making the world seem as though it were painted in the most vibrant shades of gold and red. The air was still, the only sound the gentle rustle of the breeze and the distant call of birds. Elara stood there, her breath catching as she took in the breathtaking sight. It was as though the entire world had opened up to her, its beauty vast and overwhelming. "This is the edge of everything," the stranger said, his voice soft as he stood beside her, looking out over the landscape. "But it is also the beginning. The road ahead is vast, but it is yours to walk, and you will walk it with the strength you found in yourself." Elara felt a deep stillness settle within her as she gazed out at the horizon. For the first time in her life, She felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She was standing on the edge of everything she had known, but instead of feeling afraid, she felt free. There were no more questions, no more uncertainties clouding her mind. She had embraced the journey, and now she was ready to walk it fully, with all the confidence, strength, and peace she had gained along the way. "I'm ready," Elara whispered, more to herself than to the stranger. The words felt like a release, a final acceptance of the life she was creating for herself. The stranger smiled gently, his eyes filled with the quiet wisdom of someone who had walked the path before her. Then we moved forward together. They stood there for a long moment, the two of them side by side, watching the world stretch out before them. The sun dipped below the horizon, the colors of the sky shifting into the deep blues and purples of twilight. The stars began to twinkle above them, one by one, like tiny beacons of light in the vast darkness. Elara felt a sense of completeness, as if she were finally stepping into the life she had always dreamed of. A life full of possibility, full of adventure, full of peace. The past was behind her, but it had shaped who she was. The future was ahead, but she didn't need to know every step. She simply needed to walk forward, to trust herself and the world around her, and to embrace whatever came next. As they began to walk again, the stars above them lighting the way, Elara felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. The journey was no longer something to fear, but something to be celebrated, something to be grateful for. She was not just walking toward a destination, she was walking toward a life of her own making, and with every step she felt herself growing stronger, more connected to the world, to herself, and to the journey that had brought her here. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew she was ready for it. The horizon was vast, but Elara walked toward it with an open heart and a soul that was free. The days grew warmer as Elara and the stranger continued their journey, the terrain shifting with each passing mile. The sun bathed the land in a golden light, casting long shadows on the path they followed. The world was slowly transforming before her eyes, each new day offering its own gifts, its own challenges, but most of all, its own lessons. As they traveled, the sense of peace that Elara had found within herself began to extend outward. She no longer felt anxious or uncertain with each new step. Instead, she felt a deep connection to the world around her, to the vastness of the earth, to the infinite sky above her. She was no longer running from something. She was walking towards something, something that was both undefined and yet deeply clear. One evening, after a long day of walking, the stranger led her to a hilltop. From this vantage point, Elara could see the world stretching out before her, the horizon wide and open, an endless expanse of land, sky, and possibility. The light of the setting sun bathed the scene in a warm, rich glow, making the world seem as though it were painted in the most vibrant shades of gold and red. The air was still, the only sound the gentle rustle of the breeze and the distant call of birds. Elara stood there, her breath catching as she took in the breathtaking sight. It was as though the entire world had opened up to her, its beauty vast and overwhelming. "This is the edge of everything," the stranger said, his voice soft as he stood beside her, looking out over the landscape. "But it is also the beginning. The road ahead is vast, but it is yours to walk, and you will walk it with the strength you found in yourself." Elara felt a deep stillness settle within her as she gazed out at the horizon. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She was standing on the edge of everything she had known, but instead of feeling afraid, she felt free. There were no more questions, no more uncertainties clouding her mind. She had embraced the journey, and now she was ready to walk it fully, with all the confidence, strength, and peace she had gained along the way. "I'm ready," Elara whispered, more to herself than to the stranger. The words felt like a release, a final acceptance of the life she was creating for herself. The stranger smiled gently, his eyes filled with the quiet wisdom of someone who had walked the path before her. Then we moved forward together. They stood there for a long moment, the two of them side by side, watching the world stretch out before them. The sun dipped below the horizon, the colors of the sky shifting into the deep blues and purples of twilight. The stars began to twinkle above them, one by one, like tiny beacons of light in the vast darkness. Elara felt a sense of completeness, as if she were finally stepping into the life she had always dreamed of. A life full of possibility, full of adventure, full of peace. The past was behind her, but it had shaped who she was. The future was ahead, but she didn't need to know every step. She simply needed to walk forward, to trust herself and the world around her, and to embrace whatever came next. As they began to walk again, the stars above them lighting the way, Elara felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. The journey was no longer something to fear, but something to be celebrated, something to be grateful for. She was not just walking toward a destination, she was walking toward a life of her own making, and with every step she felt herself growing stronger, more connected to the world, to herself, and to the journey that had brought her here. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew she was ready for it. The horizon was vast, but Elara walked toward it with an open heart and a soul that was free. One evening, as they set up camp near a small creek, Elara sat by the water, gazing into its clear depths. The creek flowed steadily, its waters smooth and uninterrupted, much like her thoughts at that moment. The journey had been long, and yet, for the first time, Elara felt a sense of contentment in the simplicity of it all. She wasn't looking for anything anymore. She wasn't chasing a dream or trying to escape from something. She was simply being, living in the moment, and allowing the world to unfold around her without the need to control it. As she watched the water flow, the sun sinking low in the sky, she thought about how much had changed since she had first left the village. She had been searching for something, freedom, adventure, purpose, but now she realized that what she had truly been seeking was peace. She had spent so much of her life chasing something outside herself, but in this moment, she saw that the peace she longed for had always been inside of her. She just had to slow down enough to let it find her. The stranger who had been preparing their campfire looked over at her and smiled. There was a quiet knowing in his gaze, as if he had been waiting for this realization to come. Elara returned his smile, a soft, genuine expression of gratitude. She was no longer the unsure, restless girl she had been when she first started this journey. She had found something far more valuable than the answers she had been seeking. She had found herself. As the fire crackled, casting its warm glow over the camp, the stranger sat beside her. The two of them watched the flames dance, their silence comfortable, unburdened. Elara felt the weight of the world shift, and for the first time she felt at home, not in a place, but in herself. "Do you ever feel the need to move on?" Elara asked quietly, breaking the peaceful silence between them. Her voice held no urgency, no fear. She was simply curious, wondering about the stranger's own journey. He thought for a moment, his eyes reflecting the flames. "Moving on isn't about leaving. It's about knowing when to stay," he said softly. "When you're at peace with yourself, the need to move or change becomes less about seeking and more about being. Sometimes the greatest journey is the one we take within ourselves." Elara nodded, the words sinking deep within her. She had spent so much of her life feeling restless, always chasing the next big thing. But now, sitting by the fire, with the world calm and still around her, she realized that she didn't have to chase anymore. She didn't need to search for something outside herself. The journey was already complete because she had already found what she was looking for. The sound of the creek gently flowing beside them was the only noise that accompanied their thoughts. Elara closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the rhythm of the water, feeling the warmth of the fire on her skin, and the peace that had settled in her heart. She had walked through so many days of uncertainty, but now she could see clearly. The road ahead might still be uncertain, but she no longer feared it. She was at peace with the unknown, trusting that each step would lead her exactly where she needed to go. The night sky above them glittered with stars, vast and infinite. For the first time, Elara didn't feel small beneath it all. Instead, she felt connected to the world, as if she was a part of the very fabric of the universe. She smiled, a quiet smile of contentment, knowing that no matter where the journey took her next, she was ready. She was walking toward the future with her heart open, her spirit free, and her mind at peace. The next morning the world felt entirely different. Elara awoke with the sun, its golden rays spilling through the branches overhead, casting soft patterns of light across the forest floor. The air was still cool from the night, but the warmth of the day was beginning to settle in. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the crisp, fresh air, and as she exhaled, she felt the weight of the past few days settle within her. Everything was clearer now. Every decision, every moment felt more intentional. She looked around at their small campsite, now slowly fading into the gentle embrace of the morning. The fire had died down to soft embers, glowing faintly like the last traces of a dream. The night had passed, leaving behind a quiet serenity, and Elara felt a deep sense of peace. The stranger was already up, standing at the edge of the campsite, gazing out toward the horizon. His silhouette, framed against the soft light of the morning, exuded a calmness that mirrored Elara's own growing sense of tranquility. He seemed to be watching something, or perhaps nothing at all, lost in the stillness of the dawn. Elara joined him silently, not speaking, just standing beside him, allowing the moment to sink in. The forest around them was alive with quiet sounds, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the soft calls of birds awakening to the morning, the distant trickle of the creek. Everything felt still, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something important to happen. And in a way, Elara realized it already had. The journey, the adventure she'd been searching for, was no longer something she had to chase or run toward. It was here, in the present, unfolding before her in every breath, in every step she took. "Do you ever stop and wonder what's next?" Elara asked, her voice soft, barely breaking the quiet. The stranger turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with a knowing expression. He smiled faintly, a smile that seemed to hold years of wisdom and experience. "The beauty of the journey is that we never really know what's next," he said, his voice gentle but certain. "And that's what makes it so precious. We don't have to know. We just have to trust that wherever we go, whatever we do, it's part of the process." Elara thought about his words for a moment, the weight of them sinking in. "So, it's not about the destination, is it?" she mused aloud, her voice barely more than a whisper. "It's about trusting the journey itself, trusting each step as it comes." The stranger nodded, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. "Exactly. It's not about a final place or a perfect end. It's about how you walk the path, how you experience each moment. You are the journey, not just the destination." Elara took a deep breath and closed her eyes, allowing the quiet stillness to envelop her. The morning sun touched her skin like a gentle hand, and for the first time she understood the full meaning of the stranger's words. The past had shaped her, yes, but it was no longer a burden. She had let go of the fear, the anxiety that had plagued her for so long. She had stepped into the unknown, not as someone running away, but as someone who was ready to be free. She opened her eyes and smiled, the weight of her decision finally lifting. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she knew now that she didn't need to have all the answers. She didn't need to know exactly what the future would hold. What mattered was that she was here, in this moment, walking forward. They stood there for a few more moments, both of them simply soaking in the beauty of the morning, the silence, the stillness. The world was at peace, and for the first time in her life, Elara felt at peace within herself. Finally, the stranger turned toward her, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Shall we keep walking?" he asked, his voice as calm and steady as ever. Elara nodded, feeling a deep sense of contentment rise within her. She didn't need to say anything more. She was ready. She was ready to continue the journey, not knowing what lay ahead, but fully embracing whatever came next. There would be more questions, more choices to make, but she didn't fear them anymore. She knew that the path she was on was hers to shape. As they began to walk once again, Elara felt the rhythm of the world around her, the steady pulse of nature, the deep breath of the earth beneath her feet. She was a part of it all now, connected, grounded, and more than ready to continue her journey. The road ahead stretched out before her, but for the first time she didn't feel overwhelmed. Instead, she felt free. The days grew warmer as Elara and the stranger continued their journey, the terrain shifting with each passing mile. The sun bathed the land in a golden light, casting long shadows on the path they followed. The world was slowly transforming before her eyes, each new day offering its own gifts, its own challenges, but most of all, its own lessons. As they traveled, the sense of peace that Elara had found within herself began to extend outward. She no longer felt anxious or uncertain with each new step. Instead, she felt a deep connection to the world around her, to the vastness of the earth, to the infinite sky above her. She was no longer running from something. She was walking towards something, something that was both undefined and yet deeply clear.